Alright guys, today what I'm going to be showing you is how to create a really simple snow globe. So how do you create a snow globe effect? And this is kind of one way to tackle it, and of course there's loads of different ways of doing it, but this is the way that I've thought about it, and this is the way it could work. So if I just play this render that I've created of it, it's fairly small, so let me just I'll just make that larger. But you can see on this render here that the snow particles are coming down. We've got refraction from the glass as well, plus the actual stand for the glass area, and then we've got some objects in there which the snow is catching on. So even if you look on the tree itself, you can see that the trees, that the snow particles, that the snowflakes are sitting on the branches as well as the top of my very simple house that I've just created for the demonstration, and also the base of the inner area just there. So how we create this is, I'm going to try and do this really quickly because I don't want it to last too long. So let me just quickly get in here and start a new file. There's going to be loads of stuff in here which you might find confusing, so I'm just going to go and start a new file. I will save that, and then I'm just going to reset everything as well, just to make sure I start from scratch. Okay, so when we are building a snow globe, I mean, most of you will know how to build the geometry, but in case you don't, you start with the sphere. I'm going to draw out the sphere. I'm going to bring on my edge faces, and what I can do also is just configure my viewport so that my selection brackets are turned off because I find them very annoying, and apply that to all viewports. You can mess around with the segment settings of the sphere. I had mine on 26 previously because I don't want it to be overly high poly, and this gave a fairly good output, so I think that works quite well. I'm going to then just add a edit poly modifier on there. I'm going to click onto polygon, and then I'm just going to delete kind of the bottom section. So I'm not going to delete up to halfway. I'm going to kind of leave most of the curve in there, because from looking at reference images, and this is a really important stage of sort of modeling and stuff, when you look at a snow globe like this, you can kind of see how, you know, they're fairly round, aren't they? They're kind of just attached towards the bottom of the actual sphere itself, and when you get the refraction and all that kind of stuff. So you've got a few ideas here, and I want you to kind of look at snow globes and see what kind of objects would go inside. So I thought this was a good little mini project to do while it's been snowing outside, and snows everywhere and stopping us from getting into work. So anyway, the next step that we need to kind of do is create a base for this. So what I'm going to do is simply create a cylinder around this. So if you click on your sphere, press Alt and X, which is going to toggle the semi-transparent state of it. So I'm going to make it semi-transparent. The reason I'm doing that is so I can see the kind of inner edge. So can you see where it's kind of darker? That's where this curve's kind of going in and overlapping. So I want to make my new cylinder the same kind of width as that hole. You see that gap just there, around there, and then just push up or down. It doesn't really matter. Just give it enough of a kind of thickness, I guess. I'm going to put the height segments down to 1 for now, and I'm going to make the sides the same as what I set my sphere, so it matches up quite well. So it's 26, so I'm going to make that 26 too. I'm going to then just move it down, so just go into my side view and just move it down like so. And what you do want is you want that to be a little bigger than the actual sphere, so it kind of appears to be sitting just inside. Yeah, so it looks like it's got a nice little base on there. Don't go too high because then it will end up cutting it off like so. So you have to be really careful. So I'm just going to drag that back down so it's just kind of overlapping slightly. And again, you can press Alt and X on that shape too, and you can kind of see where that edge is. Just overlap it slightly. Then once that's done, let me turn my grid off because it is fairly annoying. So you can select the viewport and just click G as well, just to get rid of the viewport, or you could just hit the plus icon here and deselect show grids. Base looks fairly thin, so I need to just add a bit more geometry to it. So if I just go to my edit poly, go to polygon. I'm going to select the bottom poly here, and then just go on my scale tool just up here, and I'm going to scale with the middle area here, you know, the middle of the axis. That means it's going to scale out in every axis so it maintains the shape, so we don't have like an oval shape like this or something there. So that's going to make sure it stays correct and true to a circle. So once that's done, I'm just going to extrude down a little bit just to give it that kind of base, I guess, just a really simple shape. Again, if we take our edges off, don't worry about this glitch which is here, it's just because it's semi-transparent, and I'll fix it if I just do that. If we just kind of look at that without the edges by pressing F4, you can see that it's very jaggedy, and you can see every edge. So the easy way to fix that is if you just go onto polygon, yeah, you want to select all the polys on that cylinder, then just scroll down and click auto smooth, and that's just a really quick way of smoothing that out for you. Yes, that's looking a lot nicer. Looks like a crystal ball. If only I could tell my fortunes. Anyway, so once we've got that, that's the basic shape done. So we need to then start applying materials and all that kind of stuff. What I find easier at this point is to attach these two together, and the reason for that is going to be apparent later. So if I just go onto attach just here and just click onto my base, so you can see how they're both attached now. Now that they're attached, I can start adding materials to them. Now, how do I apply two different materials to one model as it essentially is now, because I've attached it? You do that through edit mesh, because edit poly will only apply one material to the whole thing. So you need to go to edit mesh. Doesn't matter if this starts to stack up, because you can just right click on edit mesh and collapse it, which is fine. So I'm going to go to polygon. I'm just going to select the base polys. So if I just do that and then deselect by holding Alt all the other polys on the actual sphere, like the glass area, I'm just going to go to rendering, and the kind of materials that we're going to be using are going to be in mental ray, so we need to make sure that our renderer is set to mental ray. So the way that we do that is we go to render setup, we click onto common, just there, scroll all the way down, go to assign renderer, and mine's already set onto mental ray, but in case yours is on scanline or any other one that you may be using, you can just hit these three dots just here and select mental ray from this list, and then hit cancel. Or, well, not hit cancel, but for you it will be hitting OK. For me it's hitting cancel because I've already got mental ray selected. So I'm going to close that now, go into my material editor, I'm going to hit standard on any blank material, click onto arc and design under mental ray, and I'm going to select a glossy plastic. By default we'll give it this kind of beigey colour, but I'm going to make mine pretty dark like so and apply that. Can you see how that the base is darker now? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is a similar thing. I'm just going to select all of the geometry for the actual sphere, select a new material, standard, arc and design, and I'm going to select glass solid geometry, and then the transparency colour, not from blue, I want to make it completely clear because I don't want it to be have a kind of a blue tint on it. I'm going to apply that, and there we have a kind of semi-transparent kind of globe there. There's a couple of settings that we can play around in here. The IOR basically it means it's the amount of refraction. So how much do you want that glass to refract? And I'll show you later when I add some objects in there. So next we need to add our snow. So we're just going to go in and click on our create tab, and then on standard primitives, click on that drop down, go to particle effects, particle systems, sorry, and click onto snow. So it's a fairly simple or already set up particle system which will do pretty much what you want it to, have snow particles coming down. So you want to make that fairly small. In fact, I'll give you an extra tip. You want it to fit kind of this circle just here, like so. I'll explain to you why in a moment, because if you move that up, we want that to kind of fit snug, so we don't want it to kind of overlap our actual sphere, because then the particles will kind of start from outside, which is not going to be looking too great, to be honest. So you want it to be just inside, at the very top, like so. And you may think, you know, that's not going to, you know, snow all over the sides. I mean, what about all the gaps down here and all the gaps on the sides? The reason it will work is because refraction will make it look as if the snow is everywhere. And if we kind of go back to my example, can you see how it kind of looks like a spread? There's a slight gap there and a slight gap there, but we can kind of edit that. We can make our snow modifier larger if you wish to. So if I just give you an example, we could move this down and then just scale it wider, or scale it up in all directions. In fact, that's fine. So now that that's done, if I just move my time slider forward, see how the snow particles are coming down, which looks fine. So if I just play it, it'll probably come down very quickly, which is probably because I've scaled it. So what I need to do is go into my snow modifier and change the speed. It's on 10 at the minute, so I can change that down to about 2. If I play that, yeah. So what you want also is the variation to, you can adjust the variation if you like. You can change the speed to any kind of parameter that you wish. You know, don't kind of go too crazy with it, and don't make it kind of, so that's okay. That's not too bad. Again, that might be a little too quick, so we can turn that down a little bit. What you also want to do is with this particular snow particle system, you can see how the life is set to 30, so we want to put that to 100. And although that will kind of make it go a bit crazy in here, it will just keep going and going. Once we add our deflectors in, we're going to set our objects in here and the actual glass to kind of act like a solid surface, so that the particles hit that surface and it's not going to be going through it anymore. So we're just going to go to material editor, and we're going to apply our material to the particle system, to our snow. Yes, it looks like there's snowflakes there, but it's not going to show up in our viewport. It's not going to show proper, like, round snow the way that we want it to. So what you do is you go to a blank material, you go down to maps, you go to opacity and click none, you go to gradient and then click radial, and that's pretty much that stage of it done. You go back to parent, just up here, and you scroll to the top and you put face map on. And the reason you put face map on is because you want your material to apply to every single sort of face on this snow particle emitter. And I guess this is a good time to actually mention that make sure you set under render in your snow panel, hit facing, and what that means is you're going to have little planes, little flat surfaces that will always face the camera. Yeah, so that's going to make the snow always appear round, which is really, really important. So make sure that's set to facing, and that kind of links in with here face map. It's going to apply to every single face individually, so you'll get little circles. Yeah, that's going to work really well. So you want to of course change your diffuse color just here to white, because snow is white of course. You can drag up the self illumination if you want them to look even whiter, else they can kind of have a bit of a shadow, as you can see up here. You can see there. So if you kind of drag up the self illumination, can you see how they get brighter? So once you've got that texture set up like so, you can just apply it like so. And if I was to render this, yeah, I think I just paused the recording by hitting F9. But if you want to do a test render, you just go to rendering and render, and I'm just going to see what that looks like. So we've got refraction and stuff going on in there. I'm going to change my flake size down to about 1 because it is looking rather large. And also the background color, the environment color, I'm going to put to kind of a sky blue. So you can kind of just see the particles there. It's really hard to see because the background's so light, but you can see the particles that are in there like so, which is good. And you can see how they look like they're spread, you know, throughout the whole width, so all the way up here and all the way there as well. What I also tend to do is just to give it a bit more depth, because the base is going to be, the glass is going to be refracting. I can just give it like a polygon, one kind of plane on the ground, just to give it a surface there. If I just drag this down so it's correctly lined up like so. And the colour, you can kind of give it anything you wish. I'm just going to give it a grey, it doesn't really matter at this stage. So I'm going to put in some basic shapes in there. I'm not going to go in and create anything too fancy, for just to keep this you know, tutorial short. But if I just go in and start creating, or even just create shapes here, it doesn't really matter. Just create like a box, a sphere, even a torus. Let's make a torus. Yay. So let's keep that kind of like this. Do you know what? I'm going to put in a teapot as well. And I might just get rid of my sphere, just so I have some different kind of objects in there. So if I just make sure that these are kind of close together like so, select them all, then in my top view, I'm just going to drag this in and scale down, again using the middle triangle like that. And then just move it down. So again, I can make use of my side views here and just pull that down so it's on the base. Just make sure my teapot's not floating, so if you just click on that and drag it down as well. And the same with my box. You don't want a floating box, so you make use of your left view there. So they're all on the base, which is fine. Now we need to set them up so that they deflect the actual particles, so that they don't just go straight through. So as they are doing now, if you have a look, and you see how they're just kind of going out, not really doing anything, to be honest. So what we need to do is go into our space warps panel just here. Then you go in the drop down to deflectors, then you click on new deflector. And what U-Deflector does is it allows you to pick an object which is going to act as a deflector, which is really good. So, and it's really useful. So I'm going to go and draw out 4 different deflectors, and the reason I'm going to draw out 4 is because you can only pick one object per deflector, and because I have one object here, which is the actual snow globe itself, I want that to deflect the hard particles. I got 3 shapes on the inside, and I want those each individually to deflect particles. So if I draw one out, in fact, what will be really helpful at this stage is if you make sure the bounce is set to 0, the friction is set to 100%, that's going to mean that the snow is going to hit that surface and just sit there. It's not going to bounce off like a ball, or like any random object. So we're just going to go in and create 4 different particle systems. So I'll do them in a line so that I know what I'm kind of doing one at a time. For some reason, if the parameters haven't set, bounce is still 1, so make sure you just reset that. So 0 bounce and 100 friction. So 0 bounce and 100 friction. 0 bounce and 100 friction. Yeah, so the first one's like that, that's like that, that is, and so is that one. So the next thing we need to do is link this to our actual snow emitter, our snow particle system. So if you click on our particle system, which is this plane which we created before, well, it's not plain, but it it shows where the particles are going to come out from, like so. We want to then click on this icon just here. So if you hover over it, it will say bind to space warp. So if we click on that one, we can just click on each U-Deflector and drag it so the icon changes like this onto the snow emitter. So then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. And the reason why I dragged my snow emitter up is because it makes it easy to select. If it was within this globe, you'd kind of end up going like this, and it would select the globe instead, and it would be kind of odd, and it just wouldn't work. So make sure you are selecting the right thing. Now that that's set, which is great, we need to then pick our object. So if we click on the first U-Deflector, go to pick object, and if I just select the actual main body of our globe, which is fine, then I go on to the next one, go into pick object. Now I want to zoom in to the inside here, so I'm going to select the box now, then move to the next one, pick object, I'm going to zoom in again, so I'm within the actual model. I'm going to pick the teapot, and then this one, pick object, I'm going to select our torus. So now if I kind of play this through, can you see how the particles are sitting on our actual objects? Yeah, so you can see how they're on top of our teapot and stuff, and on top of our box. Okay. Right, so if you find that when you're going through, and there's still particles that are kind of coming out of here, even though you've set it up so that it doesn't and it shouldn't. You know, the problem is that there's too much variation. So what you can do is you can just drag down the variation so it doesn't kind of go out so much like this. If you keep it within the kind of space of your globe, then it's just going to keep going down like that, which is exactly what you want. So that's pretty much perfect. If it does kind of go odd, then make sure you set it up so that it properly goes down straight by changing the variation. So that's exactly what you want to do. So what you just need to do, because I did create a new snow globe, because I paused the tutorial for a second just to try and figure that out, because I did not like the fact that my snow was escaping my snow globe, which it never should happen, should it? So once that's done, I'm just going to relink these again, which is exactly what you did before. You know, when you linked your U deflectors to the snow emitter. So now what should happen is it should work pretty much bang on. If we just kind of play this, the particles do sit on top of our objects like so. You see that? So just to explain a few more parameters within the snow emitter, you got the flake size, which is pretty much exactly how big the flake is. I'm just going to reapply the material really quickly by selecting facing and then whacking on my snowflake texture. The variation, of course, is the variation of snow. So obviously the higher that is, there's more chance that there can be particles that kind of seep through and get through. So we want to put that down until it's kind of fairly straight, but not too much. We don't want to make it too linear, I guess. So the particles still kind of go sideways and stuff, but they also stay within the constraints of our snow globe, so they don't go flying out, I guess. So once that's kind of done and you're happy with the output, you can mess around with the settings. So life is 100. I always say that the life should always be as long as the amount that you're rendering. So we don't want it to kind of die out. So if I put that to 50, you'll kind of see what I mean. You can see how the particles don't last as long. They kind of just start to die out as they reach the bottom. So we want it to be 100 because we want those particles to land on the floor and actually stay there as well. So in fact, you can actually go up. You can go higher than 100. So if you want to put it to 150, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. It just means that the particles will stay on the ground a lot longer. They won't kind of disappear and kind of fade off. But for now, I'm just going to keep it on 100. You can also kind of start changing the start time. So from what I remember, you can put a minus time. So basically, if you go right to the beginning frame, you may not want to start the render with it at 0. So if it's at 0, you may not want to start the render where there's no snow particles, and it takes a while for them to get down. And by the time they actually start to hit the objects, we're on like 65 frames. So if you go to our beginning frame, 0 just here, you put your timing, so we can start it at 50 or so. Then if we just move this, oh, not start it at 50, sorry, minus 50 is what I actually meant. Minus 50. Then on 0, the particles have already traveled 50 frames, and then you're basically just going to see the rest of it where they all start to land on the actual objects like that. So that's a lot better, yeah? You get a lot better output when you're doing that. You can also change the amount of particles. So viewport count will only change how much is visible in your viewport, so you can see how they increase, but it's not going to change your render. So you want to go onto render count and put that up. So if I put it to 200, there's going to be twice as many particles, snow particles, in my render. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's pretty much it. If I now kind of go in and go to render setup, I can go into range, and if you just want to render all of it, like from 0 to 100, you can just go into active time segment, and that's going to be 0 to 100. But if you wanted to change it and make it 60 or whatever, you could go range 0 to 60. For me though, I'm just going to go into active time segment, and then go down. You can set your resolution for rendering, so whether it's like 320 by 480, which is always a good one to start off with, just to make sure everything works well. You don't want to go in and do something HD TV and make it really high res and then figure out after waiting a day or 2 days to render it that it's not working, that there's something wrong with it. So just stick onto custom and then do it fairly small, like 320 by 240, just to start off. You're going to go down, and where it says render output, you're going to click onto files. So we're going to click files and then set where you want it to save. So I'm going to leave mine in render output. In fact, I've already got a folder saved, Snow Globe. That's my other render just there from earlier, so I'm going to call it Snow Globe 2, this one. Go into setup. So you also want to make sure that you save it as an AVI file. So in the drop down, click AVI and click setup. And what you don't want to do is make sure it's not on uncompressed. You may have other codecs at home, but MPEG compressor or MJPEG, or motion JPEG as they call it, compressor is probably the best format to choose, because it will be like a fairly small file, so it's not going to take up much space on your hard drive. So if you just click onto render now, it's going to start to render that out. If you find, and this is what I was saying before, there's too much refraction going on there. Can you see how you can't even see the shapes? So that's not what I want. I don't want it to. I don't want it to render so much. So I'm just going to go into my material editor, compact material editor. Go to my glass texture, and you see here you've got IOR. If I just put that down to about 1, what 1's going to mean is it's going to be pretty much exactly how you can see it. It's not going to show any distortion, any refraction, which is not what we want either. We actually want it to refract a little bit, so you can kind of play around. So 1.1 will give you a slight refraction in there. So if you just go on to render, I want to make sure that I'm zoomed in enough, but you can kind of see. You see how there's like a slight refraction on there where you've got around the globe and stuff, which is fine. So if I kind of leave it at 1.15 maybe, just to be unnecessarily precise, go to render, and then we're going to start saving out that file. And then what's going to happen is our particles are going to come down. I mean, this is going to take a little while, so I'm not going to kind of run through it all, but I'll kind of let it go a certain amount. But hopefully that was helpful for you. I know it kind of was a bit stop-start because I had a few issues. I'm not really feeling 100%, so maybe a couple of things slipped my mind. But hopefully it helped you how to texture your particles and make them look like snowflakes, how to add a U deflector onto your objects to make them deflect particles, and then how to add materials as well onto your globe and onto the base as well. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. And if I just stop that there, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to hope it plays. It should do. Yeah, can you see how that kind of works? You could up the refraction a little, you could lower it, it doesn't really matter, you can kind of play around. But what I want you guys to do is, I want you to kind of push it. Don't just put random shapes in there. You know, make it look. You can kind of base it on. You can base it on an existing one if you want. So if you see one, something like this, little castle, I don't know, like a snowman, whatever. You know, make it fit. Make it look fitting, and so it actually works. And it's not boring like my one, which is just a few shapes. Yeah. In fact, I'll show this one, which is a lot better. It's just like a little house with trees. Great. So again, hopefully that was helpful, and I'm just going to stop the recording now, and I'll catch you in the next tutorial.